We are live with Direct Line, Montgomery County's favorite habit for, and the DMV's favorite habit for Wednesday evening. Our hosts today are Mark Unkelfer and Jackie Saxton. They will be talking to the possibly the next Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Virginia. Take it away, guys.
The Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm constantly reminded it's a Commonwealth.
You stumbled at the opening there, Dwight. Yes, it is the Commonwealth of Virginia, but we are reaching across the Potomac to our neighbors to the west. And we care a lot about what happens there because we have obviously a lot in common with Virginia. But we're joined by candidate for Lieutenant Governor Puneet Alawaja, and I assume you regularly get asked what the appropriate pronunciation of that is.
It's Aluwalia, Mark.
Okay.
I was like, come on, man, we just went over it.
We just went over, but I think, we got to let other people hear that as well.
But Mark, it's Irish.
We're going to stick with Puneet, though.
You can. It's Irish last name because it's Patrick's Day. Let's celebrate that.
It's absolutely.
Everybody's Irish today.
I changed my shirt just to go green for this.
I don't know if we have to put a ad warning on this. I'm wearing an AC/DC shirt, so.
That's okay. So you're running for Lieutenant Governor in Virginia. Frankly, the last year, 2 years, well, since the last election, let's put it that way, there have been a really extraordinary numbers of changes because the legislature flipped in 2019. And since then, I think a lot of Virginians have been surprised by what the results were because of that. The Democrats basically began doing what they had said they were going to do all along, and that caught people by surprise. What are your thoughts on that, and what can be done to reverse some of those changes?
Well, first thing is that's a very good question, and thank you for having me at your phenomenal Wednesday evening event. Delighted to be here. Love my neighbors in Maryland, successful people, business people. Well, what happened is that the changing demographics of Virginia has not been something which has happened overnight. We saw for the last 12 years, we have not won a statewide race. And when the Democrats came in and they started changing our state, and especially King Ralph, who I now address him as, started putting mandate on us Virginians. We have a habit of rebelling. As you know, we have done that for many centuries. So what we decided to do is we got to do something. And that's when I was inspired. I became a citizen soldier to stand up and fight for our rights. And I also realized that a large successful Asian American population, or the growing minority population, who we have not really reached out to because we never did that as Republicans, because we were complacent at that time. So I felt that to win in Northern Virginia and in Richmond and in Virginia Beach, somebody like me who's a pro-business candidate, who's an outsider, who knows and understands the Republican Party, the grassroots, which I've been involved with for the last 20 years, I felt that I can be that margin of victory that's needed in Virginia. Hence the reason why I decided to run for office, because my goal is to really change back Virginia to what a great state it is and was under the Republican leadership.
That makes a lot of sense. Some of the issues that have changed, for example, we've talked about, I know sort of gun rights have been under assault as a result of the change in the last 2 years. Taxes, where are you on those issues?
Well, one of the issues which was really monumental was in last January in 2020, when they came after Second Amendment rights, especially when we had all these people, patriots show up in Richmond Capitol. That's when I wrote an article in Washington Times, and I said, folks, it's a thin line between becoming a subject and a citizen. And especially, it's very hard to oppress minorities when they're armed. That was my main gist of it, because we have seen socialism in the rest of the world. In fact, India at one time was a socialist country. And I'd seen the brunt, the minorities, the large successful communities, and at the same time, law-abiding people take when they are at the mercy of looting and rioting and thugs. Hence the reason why Second Amendment was so important to me. So I wrote an article in Washington Times and wanted to be heard and mentioned that as a minority, I support Second Amendment. And as I said, it's a slight difference between a subject and a citizen. And I believe the reason is they want to get away our Second Amendment rights because they want us to become from citizens to subjects.
Yeah, and you definitely you do a really good job of explaining that on the video on your website, and you talk a lot about the way you address rights is that they're God-given. So obviously you're very in touch with your religion. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that plays into your causes that you're passionate about?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. I'm a proud Sikh American, but I grew up in a great country called India, where we celebrated Diwali, we celebrated Eid, we celebrated Christmas. We celebrated every faith. And I was very blessed, even though I'm a Sikh American, they're a small community, almost 1.5% of large India's population. We were able to grow up respecting each other's faith. And that's how America is. We respect each other's faith. And that's the reason I also fight for religious freedom and minority rights in South Asia. It's so important. I don't want any minority in the United States or overseas to ever feel that because of what they believe in, who they are, what their caste is, what their color is, that they should be penalized or the success should evade them. It should be merit-based success and opportunity to anyone and everyone. As you said, we derive it from God. God is our creator and he's the one who giveth, he's the one who taketh, not the government.
You talk about some of the changes, and we can probably switch to education, but one of the issues that you talk about is the shift away from merit-based standards. In particular, I think you pointed out some of the adjustments that Thomas Jefferson, which is really the high school in Northern Virginia that is really a crown jewel of the public education system in Northern Virginia, and in Virginia in general.
Well, it is a crown jewel. In fact, I am in the midst of that conversation. In fact, I'm speaking to TJ parents, and you have a large, successful Indian American, Asian American, and especially the Chinese American community, which are facing the same issue in Maryland itself. And they want really a lot of help with that. And that's the reason I got into it, because nobody wants to take the ownership of that issue. Because a lot of people, people who work in or live in Washington area are federal employees. They think they'll be taking the brunt of Hatch Act. That's one of their concern, or they've been made to think that. Second, they're scared to speak up because they don't want the thugs to be coming and throwing stones at their doors. Third, most Asian Americans want to keep their head down, work hard, longer, work their businesses, and raise their kids and give them good family values and good education so they can become excellent, brilliant kids. Now, I'm all for merit education because that's the only way we prosper as a nation. It's the fundamental of our great country. But what the Democrats have to do is basically imposing racial balancing, which is unacceptable. That's un-American. And I believe if we really want to have kids from other communities, and I say other communities, which means all other communities, because it's about we the people. It's not about Asians, it's not about Hispanic, it's not about Black people, it's not about white people. It's about we as Americans. So hence the reason for me is that if we really want to help proud kids, which I, as a proud American, it's proud kids, what we should do is start looking at them from the second or the third grade from these Fairfax County school system and see if those kids have the aptitude. Let them go through the aptitude test. And then what we do is we mentor those kids from the 5th grade onwards. They can have a very sharpened skill sets that position them for future in the magnet schools. It's just not, should not be, it should be merit-based, but it should not be perceived that it's all Asian American parents who are pushing the kids in that place. And it requires financial commitment. It requires a lot of commitment from the parents because they take our time in making sure that the kids are studying and becoming excellent leaders of tomorrow.
Absolutely. So on that same path of education, I know in Maryland, we're going through a lot of local legislation issues with removing SROs from schools. And that I know that's a big issue taking place in a lot of states right now, especially with the defund the police movement. What's going on in Virginia in that sense? And what's your stance on what's going on there?
I have supporting the Bolster the Blue and back our men and women in blue. I've been a big promoter and supporter of that. My grandfather was in the police and I'm a Sikh American. Most of my heritage and my folks have basically served their life for the nation and died for that cause. So I'm very proud of our heritage. And when you come from a long line of warriors, you have empathy towards are men and women in uniform. And I really stand by them and salute them for their service to keep us safe. I think who gets the most hurt by defunding the police? It's people like you and I, who are law-abiding citizens. It's also the minorities. When they dial 911, nobody's gonna come to save them or help them because they are the most successful one of them. And here's a prime example. I think it should be a wake-up call for people who are living in the bubble of Northern Virginia and Potomac. When they can come and loot and riot, and guess what? They even robbed my wife's, one of her in business properties. They walked in, broke the door, walked away with the ATM. And the leadership says that we're not gonna call the National Guard. We're gonna tell our police to stand down. And guess what? The police are standing in front and they're helpless. They're demoralized. They're being neutralized by these socialist democratic agendas. What it does is it should start to panic us. When you see Tyson's Corner, Galleria boarded up, guess what's happening, guys? It's a sign for you. When Richmond gets burned and DC gets closed, it's a sign for all of us that this country is now moving towards a socialist agenda. This is a conditioning that's going on. And where are these groups going to go tomorrow? Into the houses of people, in the neighborhoods. That's what happened in Atlanta. Remember the two couple who came out with their guns showing? Same thing. What were the BLM and the thugs doing in their neighborhood in first place?
Well, I think you put your finger on a key point, which is really a failure to recognize the impact on victims of crime. So it's interesting in the experience in Montgomery County, and I'll touch on it. There was a commission that looked at possibly cutting back on the police, and one of their suggestions was to cut back the police in areas that were minority areas, and it was the NAACP, the representative of the Montgomery County branch, that reacted and said, you know, we're not quite so sure. We think that there ought to be police coverage commensurate with the population, and cutting back by 50% would leave us with less police. And so I think it's really an issue sometimes of the progressive communities that are sort of imposing their values on others, including the minority community. And it's really worth addressing that from that perspective.
I completely concur with you. And look at what's happening in Chicago. It's unfortunate that these progressive ideas and these so-called that we protect the minorities is quite the opposite. And I believe the minorities and their kids pay a huge price in that. And I also want to say, just not minorities, I believe all law-abiding citizens pay a price. And above that, as you said in the beginning, they came after your Second Amendment rights. So if you do not have the ability to protect your wife, your family, your kids, your neighborhood, your community, and then you dial 911 when police doesn't show up, what are you going to do then? And then at the same time, they want to limit, if the government can assure that if you dial 911, the police will always show up, and then you don't need the guns, which will never be the case, because guess what we have seen in these communist autocratic regimes? They take away the firearms first. Look what happened to the Jews in Germany. They took away their guns.
Yep.
And we all know the tragedy that followed after that.
Absolutely.
Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about sort of the issue that has been very much on people's minds, which has been addressing this COVID issue. How has the administration in Virginia dealt with that? And if you're not happy, what would you have done differently?
Very, very good question again. Thank you. You know, you would never read this in Washington Post or in the CNN and the MSNBC because they want people to be, again, conditioned and be following them blindly. Look, we are a country we are technologically very advanced. There's nothing stopping us to know the data that we have, that where the COVID cases are rising, where they are lowered, how the rollout has to be effective and successful. The government hasn't used this. It has been one sweep and let's close and let's choose winners and losers, which means let's close some shops and open some shops. Like the ABC stores were open, whereas pop and mom stores were suffering. The wineries were closed, where people have those wine orchards which have to pay their mortgage, they make a living. They were closed down. I read the articles on those. So they chose winners and losers, which was wrong. If I was lieutenant governor then, what I would have suggested to my governor at that time and worked very effectively and successfully was, let's look at the data where we have these cases rising up. Let's find a way to basically contain and close that area. Because at the same time, we don't want these people to be staying at home because they're going to affect and impact their own family members. Let's isolate the cases. And at the same time, we do not harm the economy of other parts of the state or the country. It's basically using data management. At the same time, what we should have also done is made sure that our businesses, we are not kids. The government doesn't tell us how to work and run our businesses. Let the businesses find an effective way to run their businesses. Don't tell me. And at the same time, then the liability aspect was also there, that if anybody catches COVID in your hotel, then that hotel owner is liable. So where does they want to penalize success, they want to penalize free thinking, and they want to basically keep suing you and keep breaking you down. And that's their mindset.
So on a similar vein, we've talked about the handling of the pandemic. A lot of the things that people are talking about now is how different states are handling the rollout of the vaccine. I know in Maryland, we've come under a lot of criticism. It definitely hasn't been the easiest rollout compared to some other states. How has Virginia's response been with the vaccine? Are a lot of people able to get it? Are their websites crashing?
Well, we've had that issue. We've read the headlines. The governor has been on the back foot trying to share that it's coming. And we also heard a lot of vaccines, good vaccines were wasted. I believe it's very simple. The elderly, the people who are most vulnerable, pre-existing conditions, folks working on the front line, they should be the first recipient. And then you slowly work your way up to the people who don't need it, who are the most healthiest, and you do it effectively. And then you open various places to have a mass distribution. But guess what? Their mindset is the government controls it and the government rolls it out. And we all know government is not the most sophisticated and the most effective and most efficient. So hence the reason, the more control they take, the more they choke and the more bottleneck that happens, and the implementation is very poor and very unsuccessful.
So looking forward to opening up the economy, one of the things that's been a bit of a challenge, and I don't know that this is really in the lieutenant governor's race, but is the science around how folks after they've been vaccinated, whether or not what sort of limitations there should be on them. Should they continue to be masked? Should they continue to have to do the social distancing and what have you? Now the fear, of course, is that there's that 90 whatever percent to 100%, so there's still a level of risk. But what do you think the outlook is for being able to reopen once a significant number of significant percentage of people have been able to have the vaccine?
Well, again, use the data, see where we are the most vulnerable. At the same time, open up the economy, let the businesses which are struggling and trying to survive desperately, let them get back to business. You have to get the economy going. That's most important. At the same time, do an effective rollout so that, guess what, we start to build herd mentality, herd immunity. And that's what we need to focus on to be effective and be most efficient. But that's not the case with the Democratic leadership. At the same time, the economy has to open. We cannot keep staying at home. That's the reason the schools need to open. Because guess what? These unions are getting paid while they stay at home and they are collecting a paycheck. Whereas the small businesses, with the large businesses, and the people who are even landlords are having tough time because guess what? People are not working. They're not paying their rent and people are not showing up at work. It's becoming hard and harder because what they're trying to do is they're conditioning these folks. Oh, don't worry, you'll get the money at your home. There's no reason for you to go out and risk yourself. Our bodies are built in a way to start building immunity. And hence the reason when we have had an effective vaccine to a larger group of people, we'll build a herd immunity. At the same time, as I repeat again, we need to start opening the businesses effectively, responsibly. And I also request everybody, keep safe distance, wear your mask. If you need to wear 2 masks, wear 2 masks. I believe that it should be about individual decision for people to get the vaccination or not get the vaccination, or go out and shop or not shop. That's your choice. Let not the government dictate that or mandate that on you.
So
go ahead,
Go ahead, Mark.
Jackie.
I was going to switch topics if you're cool with that.
Sure.
Cool. So obviously one of the things that's making national headlines right now is what's going on at our southern border. The President Biden refuses to call it a crisis. We all know it's a crisis. How does that impact Virginia, and what would you do if you were in a situation to do something about it?
Well, first thing is we're a country of laws and order. Rule of law has to follow. There's a legal way to come to our nation. And when the Democrats have given an impression that we'll find a way to get these 20 million illegals away and pathway to citizenship, you are going to have another $20 million coming, 20 million people coming to this country. And if we are such a racist country, mind you guys, if we are such a racist country with such bad people, why do everybody wants to come to the United States? We're still a land of opportunities, folks. Hence the reason why it's important that we respect the law and order of our nation and of our land. Hence the reason in Virginia, there are a lot of people who are on IT business, on H-1B visas, on the pathway to citizenship or green card. What happens is when you overwhelm the system with people coming to this country illegally, and you want to take care of them because you see them as a vote base, the people who are on the H-1B visas or on green card pipeline, who have families waiting overseas, be it in Asia, be it in African America, or be it in Central America or South America, the process slows down. Your wife and kids and your family members are not going to be able to come sooner because you have basically now, you have choked the system again. And that's irresponsible. And at the same time, the people who are coming to this great nation, okay, illegally, are also bringing a lot of issues to this country, especially COVID crisis. We also don't know if they have some terrorist link or not. It's a national security issue. It's a homeland security issue. I just fail to understand that when we have the wall being built and we want people to come legally, we do offer work permits or work visas to people to work at our agriculture plants or at the seafood industry. Let's follow the law. Why are the Democrats so much hell-bent on breaking our country's law and order situation? That comes to me in one thing in mind, because they want this country to be like the rest of the world, where the 99.8% of the people are controlled by the 0.2% of the rich elitist and people who don't care about the rest of the people who are citizens of this country.
I was going to ask a next question. Of course, the process for picking Republican nominees in Virginia is very much up in the air. I know that there have been sort of different approaches, possibly having a convention. That obviously has its challenges. Where do things stand, and what do you support as an approach?
Well, we had made a decision luckily in December, and that would have given us enough time to rally and focus on building a strong, effective campaign. But what so happened is that the indecision created a long impasse almost till last week, where we finally made a decision on going into an unassembled convention on May 8th. I'm glad we've reached that point. We will hopefully have a nominee who will win. Now there's a mad rush to sign up delegates. And I hope a large of your viewers who have family members living in Virginia become Puneet Ahluwalia's delegate, because we believe that we have a unique ability to win in 2021, because guess what? The large successful minority community, the first generation immigrants, the changing demographics of Northern Virginia, the single mothers, the suburban moms, the kids, I'm the margin of victory. Because I have been in Northern Virginia since '93. I understand. I've been part of the community, lived in McLean and Vienna area since '93, and I understand those issues. And these are issues which are so important to Northern Virginia that basically it will be a positive impact for the whole of Virginia.
So, I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of negative headlines about Governor Northam over the past couple of years. You know, there was the blackface scandal, there's the way he's handling the pandemic, everything in between, right? So you would think it'd be, oh my gosh, this guy's a disaster, no brainer, let's get a Republican into the governor's mansion. What do you see as being the biggest uphill challenge for making that happen, regardless of who wins the primary?
Well, first thing is we have to have unity in our party. It's so important. And I believe that if we have someone who is pro-business, very articulated in his message of how he's going to make Virginia one of the top state to do business, to raise a family, and at the same time, keep people safe. And the most important thing is we want a fair system, a fair opportunity. That's what I would like to see in our next governor candidate, because those are things I can help and support his vision. My goal is he's the CEO, I'm the CEO. I'm going to be the best implementer because I know what it takes to implement successfully, because guess what? When you come to this country, you work hard and very hard, and you refine your techniques and your ability to be successful. So you use your years of experience, and hence the reason what my goal is, because I've worked in so many diversified fields, is to translate that experience to create more jobs, great education system, at the same time make sure that our police are never defunded, and we have an immigration system which is fundamentally working for all Virginians, even though it comes in the federal thing. But what we want to do is we want to have an effective play which will help people get on with their lives, enjoy the success of living in Virginia and their neighborhood in Maryland, and truly enjoy being Americans.
You have a very competitive race in the Republican Party for, actually, well, in both parties, but in the Republican Party immediately for governor. Do you have a preference for either specifically who you want as a running mate, or B, the type of person that you would like to see as a running mate?
I would like to see someone who's an outsider, somebody who's a pro-business person, believes in limited government, who will stand strong on conservative values. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a conservative," but when the time comes, they start making deals with the Democrats. What we need to do is somebody who's going to stand strong and keep Virginia at the forefront. At the same time, he's also going to have an ability to really tie the success of Northern Virginia with the rest of the Virginia, which I really want to do, because I see that there has been so much desperation. As I've traveled all over Virginia, there's a lot of disappointment and desperation. So there's also a very anti-establishment mood within the grassroots of the Republican Party. So hence the reason I believe if there is someone who is going to stay strong to conservative principles, but at the same time, common sense ideas, common sense values, these are so important in our next governor, because I think the leadership makes a huge difference. As you were mentioning earlier, that King Ralph, the blackface governor, the person who could not do anything right effectively, has really given Virginia a bad name. Now we have become less competitive. He has imposed more taxes. He doesn't even listen. He's unable to compete with the unions, because he's telling the unions to open up the schools and they don't want to listen to him. So he's a weak governor. So we need a strong governor who can really help to make this thing happen. And I'll be his best ally, his implementer, to make sure that we have a successful Virginia. And guess what? Once you get elected, you are not for the Democrats or for the Republicans. You're a lieutenant governor for all Virginians. My goal is to make Virginia great for all Virginians.
You've talked a lot about your background from Northern Virginia, and I guess that really gets to the heart of one of the challenges that Republicans have had in Virginia, is the sense that you've got the Republican Party of the rest of Virginia trying to be more competitive in Northern Virginia, which is effectively no longer a southern state, but a mid-Atlantic state like we in Maryland. And I guess you've talked about how you want to make the party that much more competitive, and what the strategy is for making the Republican Party more competitive in Northern Virginia. Is that a message that's resonated with Republicans outside of Northern Virginia? And tell me what kind of response you've gotten.
I have gone to most of Virginia, and people are very positive about those responses when they've heard that I'm a conservative. I believe in Second Amendment. I believe in voter integrity. I also believe in small businesses, because that's what drives the point home. And I think the biggest one is I want to create the educational opportunities for Virginia kids. Let me be very, very clear. I want to build a bridge between the Rappahannock divide. There's no Northern Virginia, there's no Rappahannock or the rest of Virginia. There's one Virginia. We're not siding with with DC or Maryland, or we're not becoming part of Tennessee. We are proud Virginians, and we will fight to get Virginia as one state. That's my goal. Hence the reason, as a Northern Virginia, I know these communities, what they want and what they believe in. At the same time, it's the same thing what the rest of Virginia wants. They want to make sure that the government is transparent, it works. We want to have equal opportunity for our kids in the rest of Virginia, which is the southern part of Virginia. Hence the reason, the intellectual financial capital that exists in Northern Virginia, my goal is to translate that into the rest of Virginia. We have such successful business people. I was speaking to this group of IITians who are from Indian origin, and they have said, look, Puneet, we have some great ideas we want to discuss with, and I'm going to roll that out in April. But what is important is that we don't even have Wi-Fi. In the last almost 2+ terms of the Democratic governorship, we don't even have Wi-Fi in the rest of Virginia. How do you expect these kids and these people to upload their resumes and compete not only within the state of Virginia, at the same time within the United States and globally? That's one problem. Second, the education system is really failing. We can use the advances through Zoom and other technologies to really impart those knowledges. And at the same time, why do I want to invest in a system which is failing, which is creating liberal students? If you have a technical skill set, why don't you go to a vocational college or a technical school, get a certificate and start doing AC work or whatever field, or a welding work, whatever you need to do. You don't need to have $170,000 debt on your head, and then you have to study more because that's the only choice you have any longer. So the goal is to break open that glass ceiling that we need to feed the system. So hence the reason, educational opportunity, expanding the business opportunities, and at the same time, when you make the entire state conducive to get businesses, so you would lower the taxes. And that means gas tax has to go down. The BPOL tax should be based on net, not on gross. Get rid of the car tax, get rid of any additional tax, even including property tax, which is going up in Northern Virginia. Reduce these taxes so you attract businesses. Now, when you have education system and long distance learning available, you're able to attract businesses to come to these rural and other parts of Virginia. And you also will have talent to hire those people. $15 goes a long, $12 to $15 goes a long way there. And then, most importantly, do not push $15 minimum wage on people, because that's going to scare the daylights out of small businesses, because it's an overhead. Let that be decided by free market enterprise. It's between the employee and the employer, how much they choose to pay.
So you brought up election integrity a little bit earlier. What kind of situation is Virginia looking at in terms of, I know in a lot of states they're trying to really, I mean, and they being the Democrats, really trying to nail home, and we're seeing at the national level, HR1, we're going to keep mail-in ballots for everybody and all that. So what is Virginia dealing with for the gubernatorial election?
Well, as we are going through the entire state of Virginia, voter integrity is such a huge issue, and it's a huge issue with a lot of Virginians. As a party, in fact, one of the reasons we are here for a meeting is to make sure there is election integrity. There is a transparency in the process, because if this fails, then we have failed as a country. We are not a democratic country. We are a role model for the rest of the world. So hence the reason election integrity is very important. So what I'm going to be proposing in the next coming months is folks to become poll watchers. And who better than our youth, who should be interested in making sure that this democracy is not slipped out of our hand, and they are the caretakers and the bearer of democracy, because the future is theirs. So my goal is to invite all kids, all conservative kids, all kids from different universities across Maryland, come become part of Puneet Ahluwalia's campaign, be a volunteer, and be poll watchers. Be the guardian of democracy. That's so important. At the same time, we want to make sure that whenever you are going out to vote, you need to show your voter ID, or if not, a state-issued driver license. And if you have to mail in your vote, you need to show that you're a citizen, and there have to be signatures that have to be matched. And guess what? We have one day of election, and that's the day we count our votes, and we know who's the winner and who's the loser. We cannot have an open-ended ballot box finding treasure hunt, because guess what? For some reason, we haven't won there, or we found these here, because guess what? We know that the shenanigans Democrat play with, and we will not let that happen any longer. I'm sorry, that game is over now.
You touch on one of the great challenges with the mail-in ballot, which is the comparison between signatures and old signatures and new signatures and what have you. And I think sometimes voters are being sold something of a bill of goods, because when there is a good match program, when appropriate, when the law is followed, a lot of votes end up getting called into question. Whereas if you go in person on election day and you do the, provide the ID, you have a lot more assurance that your vote is going to be counted the way you intended, as opposed to the mail-in ballot where there's more subject to more question as to whether or not it actually gets there, or whether or not once it gets there, it's being appropriately counted. So I commend you for making that approach and encouraging people to do the more traditional approach to voting.
Thank you. You look, folks, we are a model democracy and we need to stay that way. And it's important for us to ensure that happens. And it's just not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue, as I've been hearing about it. But to me, it is about our democracy. It's about the future of our nation. It's what, if we talk about the oldest democracy, then we better find ways to keep that oldest democracy a democracy, not just something which we speak for the sake of speaking. Hence the reason it's so important for us to lead with example.
We had Jim Gilmore on last week. And
great guy.
Of course, he ran for office with the car tax, which was a way of really, how shall I say, crystallizing or encapsulating the tax issue with something that everybody really understood. That said, the final phase of the car tax didn't go into effect because there was a change in the governor. It was over 5 years and he was only governor for 4 years. Can we get that final year of the car tax finally removed?
Yes, yes, and yes. And I'll tell you, this is the reason especially after the pandemic, it's important to put money in families, every family's home, and enhance and increase their paycheck. My goal is to work with the governor and eradicate that remaining 40% of the car tax. I'll be looking at making sure that the new Green Deal, which is also going to add $800 on people's utility bills, goes away. Another $800 to $900, which is going to be added by the increase in gas tax, that needs to go away. We need to make sure that the depot tax, which is being charged on gross revenue, should be on net revenue. That helps not only small businesses, but every business, because most of these large businesses, 60 or $80 million companies, are really basically it should be on net. It's not fair. At the same time, there should be a sunset provision on some taxes. It cannot be an open checkbook for this government under Democratic control to keep increasing spending and not cut down the waste. It's so important that we cut down and shrink the budget and allocate resources to veterans, to our elderly, to our needy, to people who are our kids with pre-existing conditions. We need to put our resources, which helps with educating our kids and compete on the global level. We have to help the small businesses to become strong again. Guess what? Because they're the backbone of our state and of our country. There's so many things we need to do, which we should be doing, but we're not doing because the Democrats want to control power and move this country into a socialist direction, which means that a 0.2% control the 99.8%.
So we're coming up on the end of the show. We wanted to make sure we leave a couple of minutes for you to discuss any other things you feel like you didn't get a chance to talk about. And then also, plug where can people find you, your website, how can they donate, how can they get involved? Well,
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate Dwight, Jackie, and for having me here on the show. It's really encouraging that the Montgomery folks are inspired by the Commonwealth, and I hope that you can translate the success of Governor Hogan to your next governor. My website is Puneet for LG. Mine is a grassroots campaign which involves all proud Americans. What I need from you is your one day's lunch money, so I can really take on the bread and breakfast of the Democrats. But if you choose to give me not one day's lunch money, it could be a family lunch also. I'll appreciate that. Because guess what? If a few thousand people give $25 to $100, we win this election hands down. We win this because it's about the people. My goal is to mobilize the people, inspire the people. If you want to be a volunteer, you want to be a poll watcher, you want to have a future in politics, come join our campaign. Take a front seat. You don't have to look from outside inside, because guess what? Ours is a very transparent campaign. We need your help. And guess what? My good friend Sam Malhotra, he's hosting a fundraiser for me next week. I'm so appreciative of large Indian Americans who one or two are the very successful ones who have really written me big checks. I can't thank enough because it's our democracy. It's about our liberty. It's about the foundation of this great nation. It's called growth, freedom, and opportunity. So this is an in-person fundraiser, which we are hosting next Wednesday at the Palms. My friend Sam Malhotra and my good friend Tom Garrett, former Congressman Tom Garrett, is hosting it. We'd be delighted to have people. And if you want me to do a meet and greet with you and you want to write me small checks, that's what I really want. I really need your help. We can win this together, folks.
You touch on somebody who's really one of the secrets to Larry Hogan's success, although maybe the governor may not put it that quite way, but Sam was obviously both a member of the Governor Hogan's cabinet and then was his chief of staff and really served our state extremely ably. And we're really appreciative of all that he did. And it's certainly, how shall I say, for Marylanders, a strong endorsement that you have Sam's support. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. No, he's a friend, he's a brother. His family I've known for over 20, 25, 27, 30 years. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed in this whole process where we've had such great support of a lot of people. And it's, you know, I'm just very blessed. And just with your support and your blessings, we can win this together. And I've been at this for over 20 years. I'm not Johnny come lately in the Republican Party. I've worked the grassroots, and I know what it takes to win this, and we're working hard. We have a great team, but I need your help, folks. Write me a one day's lunch money, or if not, a family lunch would be fine. So it's puneet4lg.com.
Yeah, think of all that money you're saving by not going out to lunch these days, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I with the fees they tack on Uber Eats, I've spent a lot on lunch.
I guess it cuts both ways, right?
But yeah,
Now, you were involved with Bob Ehrlich's campaign, were you not?
Yes, I helped him raise the money. He's a great guy. So brilliant guy. In fact, I knew his chief of staff. He used to work for the Livingston Group. God rest his soul. Yep. And
Steve was a great guy.
Yeah, he was an awesome guy. And I know the Livingston Group always host a fundraiser in his honor, and raise money for good causes. So, you know, we have close ties. We have a lot of friends and family in Maryland. So we are tied to the hip, just not to the Potomac. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Certainly a friend to Maryland. We've found a lot of connections. We're wishing you obviously the greatest of luck in your campaign, and we're looking forward to see how everything plays out in the next couple of months.
Well, thank you. I look forward to your wishes, and dollars and cents will be most helpful and appreciated.
Awesome. And thank you everybody for watching. We will see you next week.
Yeah, and say a prayer too. Thank you.
Thanks. Good luck.